What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome in to another edition of In the Paint here on the network, where we break down everything NCAA basketball has to offer for us. And of course, when I say we, I mean my friend and co-host Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Who'd have thought that we'd be sitting here and in what, 24 hours or so, it's going to be March.
Mhm.
And we're going to be saying, let the madness begin. I just can't believe it.
Yeah, we had last year, the leap year. It was like an extra hurdle, February 29th. But this year, nope, we're going straight into March. And yeah, myself personally, I've always taken the Thursday off. At least now that I've, gotten a job out of bartending and I get PTO, but I've always taken that first Thursday off. Took both days off this week. So, or this year, I should say. So I'm excited, for the tournament. Obviously, a lot, to figure out before we get there. And it's really been last night, and we are recording the 26th of, or excuse me, the 27th of February. Last night, Michigan State kind of the first kind of moment for me, it was like the Puxatawny Phil seeing his shadow, like, oh, a 60-foot buzzer beater. Like March is coming. And yeah, we are, most teams, San Diego State's got 3 games left. A lot of the low majors will get their conference tournament started in a few weeks. And then, yeah, it'll be selection Sunday, on, I believe it's the 17th. I know the first Thursday is the 20th. So to get a little quick
I
math,
think it's
probably
the
butchered.
16th. The 16th will be
There we go.
selection.
Closer than expected. But it's a good little segue into kind of how we'll start things off. Obviously, at the top, with the top 25. Plenty of moving and shaking here, but just going through the top five, not huge movements. We did see Alabama fall out, as we kind of expected, but Tennessee has moved in to number 5, number 4, Houston, number 3, Florida, Duke in at number 2, and Auburn bringing in all 60, at least in the AP, all 60 first place votes. Ironically, I did look this up. The coaches poll, Duke actually got 2 coaches, number 1 picks, or number 1 votes, I should say. Some other storylines, big news, falling out of the top 25. We talked about them last week a lot. Kansas out of the top 25. That ends 80 weeks, 80, of being ranked. 2021 was the last time they were not. Michigan State moves up into the top 10. And of course, kind of on the back of last night beating Maryland in College Park, they are 22-5. Might actually be 23-5 before I updated. I don't know. But either way, also Clemson and the aforementioned Maryland, were some of the big movers. Some of the big fallers, unfortunately, the big man is not there, and Purdue is feeling it. They've fallen a bit. Marquette and Texas A&M both stumble a bit, but once again, when we're talking about the tournament, none of these teams, even Kansas, unless they really fall apart. Even then, Kansas is going to be in, and all of these teams will be. But Raider Jim, your thoughts on the week that was in the top 25?
Yeah, not sure how I feel about the Auburn thing. I will tell you, it's like Ric Flair always says, "You to be the man, you got to beat the man." And when you're sitting at number one, okay, well then somebody beat them and take care of business. But from the Auburn standpoint, I'm thinking back to a few years back when Gonzaga rode number one for almost the entire season. Baylor runs number one for almost the entire season. Boy, that's a hard one when you finally get down to those last 6 weeks, and it becomes a 6-game season.
Mhm.
Yeesh, anything can happen, and I'm looking specifically, depending on how things would line up, if Oregon State happens to somehow get into that tournament, I would not wanna be matched up against an Oregon State because they are pretty dangerous, I think. But Auburn, congratulations to them for what they're doing. Kansas, like you said, 80 weeks. It was a good run while it lasted, but it ain't there no more. Izzo is back. I know last year we questioned Tom Izzo and what happened to the Spartan mystique, but he just kind of like shook the dust off his shoes and came back, and here he is. They're riding a 4-game winning streak, including they have beaten those 4 wins. They have beaten 3 top 20 teams, including Michigan. So they're definitely, they're not just getting by. They're actually making statements each and every game. St. John's went out over the weekend, took care of business like we thought they would against UConn, and they did it by 14 points.
Ominous.
That's pretty darn convincing. I don't know if that speaks more for UConn's abilities or St. John's abilities, but I'm going to give the credit and the nod to St. John's on that one. Purdue, because you had some teams down here that are took some drops. Marquette, they lost, of all things, they've lost to Creighton and Nova, who are really struggling this year.
Yeah.
Purdue has lost 4 straight. A&M, I think it is, has lost 3 straight.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's pretty rough at this time of year. You don't want to be doing that. Duke, watch out. They're dangerous. They don't have to have Coach K in there. They're just a well-coached program, and they're firing on all cylinders right now. Yeah, it's going to be a good couple of weeks leading up to the 16th of March.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I know obviously Michigan State took them down last night, but I've seen a few games from Maryland, and they're a sneaky team. You talk about a team that you don't want to play, especially now. They're kind of in that 4 through 5, maybe 6 range, 6 if it goes really badly. I don't think anybody's going to want to see them on the weekend of that first, matchups going forward. Michigan State, you mentioned Tom Izzo back. I wonder if it just took a little while or maybe a little bit longer for the elder statesman to either, figure out the transfer portal or essentially get out. We saw Boeheim get out, and then we saw Jay Wright was before this. I don't know if you can, put that there towards him, but we've seen a lot of situations where, some of the older coaches have essentially just some of them have straight up said it, like, I can't do this. Like, I can't recruit even my own guys. And Izzo, I think myself, I know I was definitely wondering, is this someone that the transfer portal is going to pass them by? Does not seem like that is the case. But we shall see if this is just maybe a 1-year thing, because that's the other part. Sometimes you do get kind of lucky with some transfers, and then guess what? Everyone leaves again, and then we go back to where they were. But obviously, Izzo is that name. And it's Kansas as the preseason number 1 and the team that I legitimately thought was outside of Duke. I thought Kansas was the best team. I don't know what's going on. It's so mind-boggling, and Bill Self is way too good of a coach for me to even, start to think that it's, he's lost it. I hate to say it, but what we've seen out of Kansas since Hunter Dickinson has got there, which I thought Hunter Dickinson was going to take them to the next level, which is crazy for Kansas, but he's almost kind of been a bit of an anchor for this team, unfortunately, and not in a good way as you would describe a center. Unfortunately, but I will say this, they're still a very talented team. And if they get in, a 7, 8, 9, I would not want to be a 1 or a 2 that has to deal with that if they get through their first game. So that's something else to keep in mind, where this is probably one of the lowest stock prices you'll ever see from Kansas. Who knows? Might be a time to buy the dip, but again, we got to see going forward if this team can really right the ship. But it was very difficult. And then one final thing, I was very, very impressed. A nice little segue into our next topic. Duke, Illinois was a game that we kind of talked about a little bit as the upcoming games to keep an eye on. And Duke handed Illinois their worst loss in school history, I believe. Technically, it was at a neutral court, kind of a weird time for just a big non-conference game to be going on, but did want to shout out what Duke did, unfortunately, and that does lead us into our next topic, kind of a little tongue-in-cheek, little discussion here. I saw it on, I don't know, some other talking head podcast. So I figured why not us get a bite at the apple. And it was the question essentially was you get Duke and Auburn versus the field in the tournament. Who do you got? Essentially, I mean, we've seen Duke Auburn 1-2 essentially, at least for the last 3 or 4 weeks, but really been the best two teams all season. So, Raider Jim, I'll give you the first bite at this apple. Duke and Auburn versus the field.
Duke and Auburn versus the field. Who do I have? I have Houston. No, just kidding. Just
Wow.
I would give the nod to Duke at this point. I know Auburn's kind of just on autopilot right now. They're taking care of business, but I think Duke has got that momentum going. And I like momentum building behind a team as we get into March Madness. And wow, let's see what happens. But really, I think Duke's definitely at this point, unless something dramatic happens, they're going to be one of the top seeds. I would just have to see how they line them up. But I like Duke.
Yeah, I genuinely believe that Duke is the best team in the country. It pains me to say it. I'm a hater, I'll say it. You know, you're either a Duke fan or a Duke hater. There's not too many people who are, you know, on the fence about the Blue Devils, even with their kind of recent out of the news or at least out of the success spotlight. Anyways, but Cooper Flag, I mean, goodness, if you have not gotten an opportunity to see, you better better watch him now before he goes to the next level because he's probably going to be the #1 pick. He is one of the most talented freshmen I've ever seen at 18 years old. It's absolutely incredible to see what he's doing. The ACC is down. It's not the ACC of, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s. I get that. However, Duke, I believe, top to bottom, is built to go deep into the tournament. And I think John Shire is the right guy for that job. He has kind of quietly shut everyone up. Again, Duke has, and we'll see. I mean, Duke's been successful in the regular season. A lot of, I think, the gripe with Shire has maybe been in the tournament. So he could very well be in this same position. I personally don't think so. I think this is the talent on this team is overflowing. And I think when you do get into the tournament, what we've seen, especially with UConn, is at the end of the day, a lot of the times the talent does win out. You did bring up Houston, though, and Houston is the other team that definitely jumps out as, I mean, I feel like the last 2 or 3 years, and I believe it's still Kelvin Sampson. I believe he's still running it down there. But the last 2 or 3 years, Houston has been that team that you're like, you don't want to play them. You don't want to play them. And then for whatever reason, they're out in the second round or the Sweet 16. I really do think this year they could take that extra step forward. And another reason why I'd like to give Duke and Houston and some of these other teams the nod over Auburn is what I mentioned last week. I really do think the SEC, that grind, that gauntlet is really going to wear this team down. I mean, Auburn's playing fantastic basketball right now, but really in the grand scheme of things, these games don't matter. I think we all imagine Auburn is a 1 seed. But in 3 weeks, one bad night, and it could all come crumbling down. You just wonder if that gauntlet kind of catches up to them in March. Just because that SEC is so competitive and so good. But it's gonna be fun. I think gun to my head, Duke and Auburn versus the field. I'd probably take Duke. I think talent is going to win out 9 times out of 10, and I think Duke has the most of it. So, moving on to our team and conference reports. We're going to start with the Gonzaga Bulldogs and the West Coast Conference with Raider Jim. Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
Hey, no sour grapes over here. Hats off to Randy Bennett and the St. Mary's Gales for taking care of business. Outright champions of the West Coast Conference. Now, it's been a while since anybody's been the outright champion, and they're not called Gonzaga. So congratulations to Coach Bennett and his boys. I mean, hey, they went into the Zags house, took care of business last Saturday, and it wasn't, there was never really a contest going on. There's a little bit of a contest, but it didn't come down to a nail biter or anything like that. So what's going to happen now with Gonzaga? It's up to Mark Few. He's got to pull some Obi-Wan Kenobi stuff here. And he really, he might want to pull Yoda in off the side too, because they're going to have to get the troops in order and make them understand, okay, you've been beat twice. Are you really going to let those guys beat you again? Because for all intents and purposes, when the West Coast Conference tournament comes down to the final game, it should be Gonzaga and St. Mary's. Now, with that said, there's still one weekend of West Coast basketball left to play. Now, last night, those pesky kids from Oregon State, they almost did it again as they were playing University of San Francisco. San Francisco gets the win 74-72. And what that does is that sets them up as in a tie for second place in the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga, written for TV, because guess who plays on Saturday? It's going to be on ESPN. It's going to be the Zags against USF. Now, they played a few weeks back, and the Zags took care of business by, what I'm seeing here is 11 points. I think Gonzaga, even though they're traveling, it's going to be a game on the road. Gonzaga knows what they have to do. They've got to take care of business. Now, for St. Mary's, it's not going to change their status as champions of the division and the number one seed for the tournament, but they're going to play those pesky kids from Oregon State. And I want to see how hard Oregon State comes out and presses things. That's going to be a fantastic game. That's also taking place on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. And then get ready, because 1 week from today, it is the start of the West Coast Conference tournament already. And then, they're going to have their play through the 11th, and we'll see what happens with that. But Ryan Nembhard, he's the senior, one of the backcourt guys. He's getting very close and will probably break the West Coast Conference record for all-time double-doubles, assists, and things like that. He's having a fantastic season. He's just, again, the chemistry is a little bit off. But, you and I both agree, and along with other people who have opinions, when it comes down to March, you just need that chemistry for that 6 weeks. And a lot of upsets can happen come March, so we'll see what happens. I'm still going to take Zags in the West Coast Conference tournament, and let's see what happens this weekend. And nice to see that St. Mary's is going to get a bid one way or another, because they finally cracked through, and I think they got 23 this past week in the rankings. So good for them making it into the AP.
Yeah, that was, obviously unfortunate for Gonzaga, but for the health, I think, of the conference, to see St. Mary's not only this year, but it's kind of like, and they're not at the same level as Gonzaga historically, but you take the last 5-6 years, they'll put their resume right up there with Gonzaga. It's been fantastic to see the WCC essentially just a default, almost too big conference now. Because okay, and who knows, maybe San Francisco or someone else can sneak in, and we see it being a 3-bid league. But I agree with you. I do think when it's all said and done, I assume WCC in Vegas again.
Correct.
Yeah, so it'll probably be Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and I agree with you. I would put my money on Gonzaga. I think it would just mean a lot more to them, just because they're not going to want, and it's really hard to beat a good team 3 times. That's the old cliche, but it is very, very true. So moving on to my side of things, San Diego State and the Mountain West Conference, obviously for the Aztecs, they had a week where they had 2 of probably their most important games of the season. They went 1-1. Unfortunately, the one that they really probably wanted was the game in Logan against Utah State. They lose by 8. That made this past Saturday's home game against New Mexico essentially a must-win to kind of keep that bubble or that at large bid hope alive. And they got the job done. They win by 8. And at the moment, San Diego State continues to kind of be one of the last 4 in, which would mean that they're playing in a play-in game. Of course, if you were to believe the bracketologists and all that stuff. Overall, for the Aztecs, Nick Boyd and Miles Bird at the guard position have really essentially been the heartbeat of the offense going forward. I really do like their size. I expected a little more, especially after the non-conference. I mean, this team beat Creighton and Houston, and New Mexico's been good, and I know Utah State's been good, but they've had some real kind of let-ups this year. Really felt like this team has a lot more left. And then down low, Magoon Guath, and I believe I got that pronunciation correct. Just a menace, averaging almost 3 blocks a game. Offensively, look, he's essentially a Jacob Mensah. He's gonna post up and shoot maybe 50%. The one big issue I have with the Aztecs as a whole is their free throw percentage. It's disgusting. Their free throw shooting, I should say, and the free throw percentage backs it up. 68%. That has to improve, especially if we're talking about a March run. Now again, looking at I pulled up their quad 1, 2, 3, and 4 records, and I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the Aztecs at 8-6 in quads 1 and 2, including again, I said wins against Houston, Creighton, and those are ones that are definitely going to build that resume. And one thing that was really cool to see, the win over UC San Diego, that is a quad 2 win. So again, not going to miss an opportunity to tip my hat to what UCSD's got going on down there, as looking like a really solid basketball team. But for the Aztecs, they have 3 games left. Away to Wyoming, at Vegas, and home to Nevada. The Nevada game is a big one. Both UNLV and Nevada are quad 2s. Wyoming is a quad 3. So we shall see. The Aztecs will definitely need to avenge that home loss to UNLV. That loss is one that really sticks out for the Aztecs on their resume, probably their worst loss of the season. So they're going to look for a little bit of revenge. I think overall, the Aztecs, they're going to need to win these next 3 games, and I think win at least 1, maybe 2 conference tournament games to really feel safe. But we shall see. It's a bit of an uneasy feeling as an Aztec fan. Haven't felt this in quite a little while, unfortunately, or I guess I should say fortunately. But this year, I do think we are going to be biting our nails on Selection Sunday. Or they go out and win the conference tournament, and then everyone breathes a sigh of relief. That would be preferred. But moving on to our low major conference spotlight. Again, this is just kind of an opportunity to shed a little bit of light on some possible Cinderellas. We talked last week about the Big West, and with all due respect to the Big West, outside of the 2 teams we harped on, UC Irvine and UCSD, we are switching our attention all the way to the east side of the country, the Atlantic 10, a conference that for me, I always remember being one of the more fun. I was a big Dayton fan when I was younger because of the Flyers, but always loved me some A10 basketball. And this year, the A10 looks like we are definitely going to be sending VCU. They are at the top. They're 13-2 in the conference, 23-5 overall. The reason I do say that they're probably heading in is because their net ranking is 29, which is very, very favorable for them. After that, however, you're probably going to be looking for teams that are going to try to steal some bits. And that's where you find George Mason, 13-2 in the conference, 22-6 overall. Unfortunately, a net of 65. Loyola Chicago and Sister Jean, unfortunately, their net of 107 is tough considering they have a 19-9 record, 10-5 overall. And then a little bit of a log jam as we get deeper down with Dayton, St. Joe's, and St. Louis all at 9-6. And then we start to dip below 500 with Duquesne, St. Bonaventure's, and George Washington, followed by Rhode Island, Davidson, UMass, Richmond, LaSalle, and Fordham. Obviously, as I said, looks like 1, maybe 2, if someone else out of VCU can win this conference. The one thing I will say, George Mason, do not sleep on them. They've been very good. And VCU and George Mason, are a combined 30-1 at home this year overall, not just in conference, but overall. But Raider Jim, your thoughts on the Atlantic 10?
Yeah, Atlantic 10, to me, it looks like it's just very simple. It's a two-horse race. No way about it. And VCU is definitely the leader right there in that two-horse field against George Mason. They've got each team has 2 games left. VCU is going to go against Duquesne, and they're going to play against Dayton. George Mason is going to play LaSalle and Richmond. Now, 1 week ago, VCU played George Mason, and they took care of business by 16 points, beat them 70-54. And as I was looking at the rosters, now the one thing I see is VCU's got a couple nice guards. Max Shulga, 6'5", 14 points average. Joe Bamisil, and he's also 6'4", averaging 14 points. On the rebounding side, offensive rebounds, they have this kid, Christian Furman, gets a fair amount of playing team, good on the offensive boards, and on the defensive side, they've got Cat Clark. Also have a kid on the team that is making a little bit of noise. He's got some playing time, but they're saying not so much this year, but watch out for him next year, and he's going to be probably one of the leaders on the team. Alfonso Fats Billups III. No relation to Chauncey Billups, if anybody's wondering. And it just happens that on George Mason, there's also a kid named Billups, also not related to Chauncey Billups. And then there's another team, just looking in the future, there is a redshirt sophomore that they've got on the team, Obaniah Okafor, 6'9", 215. I'm assuming he must be of the bloodline of Emeka Okafor, the dominant guy from UConn a few years back. And watch out. What's interesting about this is just kind of a side note. When you go on the VCU site and you pull up the team roster, they not only list, height, weight, grade, et cetera, hometown. They have an option to let the kids put in their Twitter handles, their Instagram handles, and there's even a column for contact for NIL opportunities, which I think is almost shameful. But, I guess in the smaller markets like that, hey, maybe, they get the ice cream store nearby to reach out to them and get a plug. So VCU, I think they're definitely the guys to beat. George Mason, though, don't sleep on them. They've got Darius Maddox, 6'5" senior guard, averaging 13 points. Jalen Hayes, 6'8" forward, averaging 13 points. And Jalen Hayes weighs 265 pounds. He is one beast at the forward position. And then on their rebounding side of things, they've got Jared Billups, the other Billups kid playing, and Giovanni. Let's see if I can get this. Giovanni Emajuru. Both very, very respectful, and they're going to keep George Mason in the game. I just think VCU's got too much horsepower, and I think they're going to handily win the tournament.
Yeah, I was going through it, and obviously, look, VCU, you mentioned what they put together, and that's a really, really impressive team and really impressive program that's really been, it was just, 10, 12 years ago or so, they were from the, one of the first play-in teams to go to the Final Four out of the A10, or they might have been in the Colonial all the way back then. Who knows? I don't know. But anyways, George Mason is the team that I did kind of want to focus on, just because I do think they have the best opportunity to dethrone VCU. Even though I'm kind of with you, I would fully expect VCU to take care of business, especially for their own seeding, because they would love to get up to that 5, maybe even the 4. Looks like they're knocking on the door of top 25 ranking. That would put them there. I really do like the duo of Maddox and Haynes, the inside out game between those two. Two very different players. You got one guy who is going to jack up 137 threes this year, and Jalen Haynes, I should say, only 14. But at the same time, I would tell Mr. Haynes that's probably 13 too many. He's 1 for 14 this year, only poking a little bit of fun. Look, that's not his game. But that inside out game is very, very impressive. offensively, I think that they would be able to maybe stand with them. I worry about the defensive side of things. And I am so glad you took on the challenge of going after Giovanni Emejuru, because I probably didn't even get close. But he's another guy that's comes off the bench. And I think that's really important in the tournament, because a lot of these teams, they're going to be top heavy, and that second wave to come in, those are your opportunities to maybe chip away at a lead or build on a lead. So I really do like when you do see teams that, he still gets 17, 18 minutes a game. But he's coming off of the bench. He is, I would assume. I mean, I haven't seen any George Mason. I'm just kind of looking over the stats, seeing some highlights. I would assume he's he subs in for Jalen Haynes most of the time. Maybe they are on this floor about the same time, but it's very interesting. I mean, again, looking through it, it looks like George Mason's running what a lot of teams do, which is a 4-guard set, which is great. I understand it. It's really easy on the eyes. I just wonder what happens when you get into March and you look across and you're like, wait, they have 4 guys that are over 6'10"? Uh-oh. So we'll see going forward. But again, you take what's given to you, and I think a lot of these smaller schools, I mean, even for San Diego State for a while, it was essentially a 4-guard set. Maybe your 6'8" guy plays whatever you want to call it, but he's the tallest guy on the floor. I would say that's maybe the biggest holdup I would have with George Mason. Just diving into them, and essentially, I really do think VCU is just head and shoulders above everyone else. George Mason maybe a little closer, but again, unless they get lucky in the conference tournament, I do think we're going to see VCU probably winning the regular season and conference tournament titles as well. Moving on to our final segment of the day. There's a lot of games coming up in the next, starting this weekend into next week. We'll start, of course, what a beautiful time to start talking college basketball when that date is March 1st. Huge one on Saturday, huge lineup, pretty much from start to finish. Auburn, number 1 team in the country. They're going on the road to face number 17 Kentucky. Texas Tech, they're number 10 in the country. They will head to Lawrence to face you would have to imagine, very frustrated Kansas Jayhawks. Alabama and Tennessee. Bama is number 6, Tennessee number 9. Cincinnati will head to Houston. As we mentioned, Houston number 4 in the country. Missouri number 14 in the country. They're heading to Vanderbilt. Keep an eye on Vanderbilt. If they sneak in, they've got some scalps this year. Anyways, that's going to be a great opportunity for Vanderbilt to pad their resume. Number 12, Texas A&M. They've been on a bit of a downturn. Not looking good, considering they're having to go to Gainesville to face number 3, Florida on Saturday. Arizona, number 22 in the country. They're heading to Ames to face the Iowa State. So Cyclones, Raider Jim mentioned, the Oregon State Beavers really did season you putting together. You got a real big opportunity. Who knows? Maybe St. Mary's is resting on their laurels. Excuse me. I doubt it with Randy Bennett at the helm, but you never know. And Oregon State will head to Moraga to face the St. Mary's Gales. And yes, number 23 is what I have them down here. Sunday, because guess what? Sundays are open now with football being gone. Go Birds. Wisconsin, number 11. They're heading to East Lansing to face number 8, Michigan State. Illinois, still licking their wounds. They'll head to Ann Arbor to face number 15, Michigan. Monday, number 2, Duke welcomes Wake Forest. Kansas, another opportunity for them to kind of build up their own resume. They're heading to Houston, number 4 in the country. Tuesday, we have Texas at number 24, Mississippi State. That's right. Mississippi State is ranked, folks. They're actually a pretty good team. They did get demolished the other night, but still, pretty good team. And then number 1, Auburn. What a tough run of things for our friends out there in Aggie land. Texas A&M, yikes. Number 1, Auburn heading to College Station to face number 12, Texas A&M. Goodness gracious, talk about a week. And then number 25, BYU. Another tough week for Iowa State as they'll welcome in the Cougars of BYU. Iowa State, of course, number 9. And then finally, Wednesday, lots. But number 16, Maryland, they'll face number 15, Michigan. Florida at Alabama, that's 3 versus 6. Missouri goes on the road to face Oklahoma. Big opportunity for Oklahoma to maybe get a big win. Marquette, number 21 in the country, they're going to face that curmudgeon, Danny Hurley, UConn, trying to figure something out. And then number 5, Tennessee heads to Oxford to face Mississippi. Mississippi, another team that's kind of out there trying to build up a resume. Not ranked, but having a very good year. Plenty there, Raider Jim. Which one of those are you looking forward to, or any that I missed?
Well, I'm liking that game on Wednesday, the one you just talked about, Marquette at UConn, going into UConn's house. And I'm telling you, it's more important for UConn than people might realize, not just for conference tournament seeding, but overall, because again, Coach Hurley already went public last week and said, quite honestly, I think a lot of my guys have given up already. You don't need to plant that seed in their developing heads, but he did, so that's the way it is. Florida, I think that number 3, number 6 game is going to be fantastic. The 16-15 game, Maryland and Michigan, that's going to be good. And, one thing that came to mind as I'm looking at Auburn, I'm looking at Texas Tech, I'm looking at A&M. Isn't it interesting? We talk about Gonzaga, and they're kind of like in a must-win situation now. They can't trip over their own shoelaces anymore. Isn't it interesting, after so many years of riding in the top 3, we don't see Baylor?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a tough one. And I mean, it's not like, well, they just had a little bit of a hiccup there. No, there isn't even a hiccup with these guys, because their overall record is 16-12.
Ugh.
I mean, that is just unheard of. Transfer portal, recruiting, I don't know. I mean, is this all the landscape of, again, we have said it too many times on the podcast. Is this what's going to happen, year in and year out now? If there's going to be a constant flux on some of the programs. Kansas isn't there. I don't think Wake Forest is going to do too much to upset Duke, but it's going to be a good game. Wisconsin, Michigan State, that's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to that one. And of course, on Saturday, all eyes are going to be for me on Oregon State and St. Mary's. Oregon State is that dangerous team that could not only put another loss on St. Mary's regular season thing, but they could go in, and depending on how the draws go for the tournament, I would not want to meet them. I would not want to meet Oregon State. I think they're more dangerous. They're kind of like the wounded animal. They're going to fight with everything they've got to survive. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by the games that I mentioned where we're talking about home teams that aren't ranked. The Kansases, the Vanderbilts, going through here, the Oklahomas, the UConns, the Mississippis, because look, Auburn, Kentucky, that's going to be a fantastic game. But besides maybe a little bit of seeding in conference tournament, maybe even national tournament, there's not a lot on the line. Both those teams are going to be in the tournament. Both teams are probably going to be in the top 4, or a top 4 seed. Again, I'm looking at Missouri. Vanderbilt might not jump out at you, but that's Vanderbilt's, early national championship. That's the game where they're like, we win this one, we can start to get rolling. Everyone is going to be bringing up NC State from last year. Whether not everyone, but the teams that are down, and who knows, maybe even Baylor's one of them that says, hey, look, we get to the conference tournament, you never know. But some of these teams, even Oklahoma, good teams that are just trying to find one more little kind of treasure to bring to the selection committee and say, look what I brought you. And whether it's a win against Missouri, and then even for Wake Forest, if they can go into Duke or Durham and get the job done, that would be huge. But I'm really intrigued to see what we get out of the kind of unranked home teams, because again, this is their big opportunity to grab a scalp and have something to present on Selection Sunday, because that's what this is all about right now. This is, for a lot of these teams, it's all about kind of hoarding as much, as I said, treasure as you can to go up to the selection committee and say, this is what I have, rate me accordingly. And that would be a huge opportunity for those teams going forward. But overall, I just think now that March is here, and again, my brain is no longer ingesting, all kinds of film throughout the week, watching football and stuff like that. Now it's an opportunity to get home and get ready. Okay, what's the 4:00 game? What's the 6:00 game? Do we have an 8:00 game? Get that remote into overdrive. Very excited for that. And this Saturday, I think, if the games show are to be believed, I should say, I think we're gonna have a really, really fun Saturday. And it's gonna be a great start to March as we get ready for the madness. But Raider Jim, final thoughts for this episode of the In the Paint podcast?
Yeah, I have a weird question I want to put out to you before I do the final thought. And that is, you mentioned Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with the end of the game they had against Kentucky, if you heard the story to that. So in the last few minutes of the game, like inside 5 minutes, it was a one possession game. The lead changed hands 5 times. And at the very end, Kentucky was able to go down and they got a basket, they got ahead, and then Oklahoma took the ball down, and his name escapes me, a kid on Kentucky that last year, he was a transfer student. Last year he played at Oklahoma State.
Oh,
Blocked the shot, but not did he just block the shot, but then when he came down and that sealed the deal, he decided to get in the face of a bunch of the Oklahoma players. Now, the question to you is, they had to review it, I guess, for several seconds, because for all intents and purposes, that would have been a technical. But then they said, well, no, because the buzzer already rang, it's not a technical. I'm sorry. No, you can't go up and just punch somebody in the mouth after, so there's got to be a repercussion for your actions. And I just think if for something like that, I guess you'd have to rewrite too many rules. But I just thought that was a very, no class, no sportsmanship. And what a terrible thing for him to do. And then because they even said in the write-up, if that would have been free throws for the technical, guess who got the win?
Yep. Wow. Yeah, the only thing, I agree with you. The only thing is, I think it may set a bit of a dangerous precedent. Just if you blanket it like, oh, if there's any technical after the buzzer, they get I don't know. I'm just thinking of a situation now. Obviously, that was uncalled for, but just a moment of like a last second dunk, and the kid is just so excited and he's hanging on the rim, and technical. And I don't know. It would be nice if they could just go almost, and they can't do this, and it's not really fair, but like almost referee's discretion. Like, does it warrant it? If they won by 20, let's just move on. In that situation, if you really do want to teach the kid a lesson, and I guess maybe not by rules, because that's a tough one. I did not see that. That's interesting. I got one for you though. Actually, you brought that up. I know there was the head coach for Missouri. He actually got on the microphone with like 1.8 seconds left. I forget who they beat, but he told the kids, he's like, look, they're going to fine us $250,000 out of our NIL. Do not storm the court. And then there was another, and I want to say it was Florida, but it couldn't have been Florida. Oh, I'm so sorry I don't have the team, but it's an easy Google search away for everyone out there. But anyways, they actually waited. It might have been Clemson. I'm not sure. But anyways, they waited a full 90 seconds until they stormed the court. They beat Florida. I believe that's what happened.
Okay. Yes.
So they let the handshake go. They let Florida get off the court, and they stormed the court. And then now the big question is, will they be fined? And that would be interesting because I want to say last year we talked because it was is it Kyle Filipowski last year or maybe 2 years ago? But either way, there was that big dust up, and then Caitlin, it was last year because Caitlin Clark had the same thing. It happened very similar,
Right.
and I don't know. One of us had brought up that, hey, why don't you just? I mean, I know it sounds crazy and it's not spontaneous, but just let the formalities happen, let the other team get off the field or court, and then do what you got to do. Everyone's off the court. It's technically the students' area anyway.
Right.
And who knows? That's not they technically could be fine. But anyways, you bringing that up just kind of hit that little ding in mind. So we threw a little bonus segment in there. Weird things going on in college basketball at the end. But yeah. So keep an eye on all that. But it's interesting. You wonder if in the offseason, maybe they do look at that technical foul stuff that, hey, you know what? If you do act a fool, maybe it's going to cost your team the game. Because then and in the other part of it, not to go on a tangent, but, what happens if, it's 30 seconds after, even 2 minutes after the game, you're walking through the tunnel and you punch them in the face?
Right. Yeah.
Like, when does it end? I don't know. Again, I think that might be a can of worms but again, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you have every right to be upset, but topic for another day. Raider Jim, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Brandon and I tend to wear our emotions on our sleeves quite often. And when we're moved by something, we don't mind sharing it. Our skin is not made of steel and we feel things for other people and could be people we don't even know. And so I just wanted to take the time on my final thoughts to extend condolences and sorrow to the family of Elijah Olani. He played for Stony Brook. He was a leader for Stony Brook, has just passed away from brain cancer, diagnosed in 2023. He actually had started to develop some behavioral problems and some physical problems. And then they ran through the testing and it cut his career. It kind of was detrimental, of course, to his final year playing for Stony Brook. And now he has passed away, leaving behind a legacy at the university. They're never going to forget what he did, his contributions. My thing is, remember, these are all kids. There's somebody's son. On the female side, of course, there's somebody's daughter. And so before we get too crazy with booing kids or getting crazy with name calling and things like that, because I sat behind somebody at a USD Gonzaga game several years ago, and this guy was not only loud, he was racist in his comments toward Jeremy Pargo, which I didn't take kindly to and let him know I didn't take kindly to it. But they're out there, they're doing what they can. And keep in mind, it is a game. It is a game. And these young men, yeah, they're out there now doing the NIL thing, trying to get to the next level, make some money for their future. They're also entertaining us. So always keep that in mind. And win or lose, let's always stand up and give them a round of applause.
Amen. Yeah, it's you do really in all parts of it too. And obviously it is kind of magnified because I think I saw a video about one of the things Europeans find odd about Americans, which there's a lot that they talk about, but look, the feeling's mutual. I mean, English drink warm beer. That's like the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. Anyways, or maybe it's the Germans. I don't know, but someone over there does. Anyways, they talked about the fanaticism of college sports and essentially 18 to 22-year-olds in the SEC football where it's 110,000 people. It's crazy. And you're right. These are kids. Their brains are not fully developed and they are essentially in the spotlight. You do need to take that into consideration. Very sad stuff out of Stony Brook. Hopefully that the university, honors him rightly. I'm sure there are plenty of opportunities, whether it's a scholarship or into the basketball team, whatever. I'm sure there's plenty going on, but hopefully the family is doing okay, and we're sending all of our well wishes out that way. My final thought, a little more lighthearted, especially for us San Diegans around here. It's been kind of, I think, a bit under the radar for some people, but look, San Diego has a new professional team. And yeah, we play in a professional sport. And look, I know soccer isn't at the tip of everyone's tongue. Although in San Diego, soccer is a very popular sport. Anyways, I am, of course, talking about San Diego FC, which just want to get out in front of it. I hate the name. It's a soccer club. It's not a football club, but okay. It's fine, Brandon. We're moving on. Anyways, want to shout them out because it was probably the first MLS game I ever watched. I do like soccer. I enjoy soccer. But I am a bit of a soccer snob. I prefer to watch English Premier League or the World Cup. There are levels to this. And anyways, the first MLS game I ever watched, and huge shout out to San Diego FC. I did a little bare minimum research before the game. They were picked to finish last in the conference. They were plus 380 to win that game. And they won 2-0 or 2-0, excuse me, 2-0. On the road in Carson, against the defending champs, the LA Galaxy. Apparently there were some players that weren't in, but still huge win for them. So want to shout out San Diego FC or SDFC. They are going to be, it's the start of the year, essentially. So if you get an opportunity and you're in San Diego, Snapdragon Stadium, make sure you don't go, in July and August, or make sure you get shaded seats. That's one thing. When I saw that stadium, I went, oh no, that's like 4 months out of the year. I cannot go there. So, all right. So now is the time to go and enjoy it. But huge shout outs to SDFC, new pro team here in San Diego. But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the In the Paint podcast, presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.
Go Zags.